Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to go over a kayak that really nobody has been talking about for a few years now, including the manufacturer. So today I'm going to go over the Jackson Kayak Coosa FD model. FD of course stands for flex drive. This is Jackson's Coosa pedal drive unit. So I'm going to go over several things on this kayak. I'm going to go over what kind of value you get with the Coosa FD. Does the Coosa FD stand up to today's competition? Because there's a lot of competition out there within this price range. So we're going to go over that and a few pros and cons. So stay tuned to the end of the video for that. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Okay guys, so what you see behind me here, this is the 2024 Jackson Coosa FD. The color you see here is Playa. You may recognize this from last year's color scheme. I went over it in a previous video, but Jackson this year has decided to bring over some of the popular colors from last year on into this year. And honestly, I think that was a great idea because Jackson's known for changing their color schemes on a year-to-year basis. And I always thought that was kind of unnecessary, even though I was always excited to see what the new color schemes were. So I love Playa here. Kind of a lighter blue, a cream, and a black blend. Looks really good on the fishing lineups. But just kicking it old school here, we're gonna go from bow to stern, talk about what's on the kayak. I'll go over some features. I'll go over some pros and cons here later in the video, so again, definitely stay tuned for that. But anyway, starting here on the tip, I've always kind of liked the drain plug in the tip there. It makes it easier if you got water inside the hull to get it at the furthermost tip. You're basically going to have it tipped upside down, and like that, it allows to get as much of that water out as possible. And if you're getting some water in there, if you're taking some surf over the sides, always carry like a bilge pump or a sponge. A sponge is going to be more than adequate for this setup because of the amount of water you can get. So I like that instead of having it like on the back corner where you got to do the whole stand it up and tip it to the side thing, and it's not on that very tip, so you're going to get a little bit of that standing water. A lot of you probably are familiar with that. That water stays in the boat if you don't wipe it up, and it gets kind of skunky and can really get to smelling bad in there. Anyway, so got the comfort grip handles on the, you've got the rubberized handles and the fabric on the edges. I'll kind of go over my thoughts on that here in a little bit. Moving on back here, really, really nice hatch lid. The hatch lid is got this, so new for 2024, you've got kind of more of a rubberized paddle park instead of the older kind of vinyl one that tended to not do as well under weather. I'm talking about sun, rain, water, all of that. So I like that. When you lift it up, you'll notice that they are including the tub that goes in there. That's really nice because they haven't always done that on the Coosa FD, but again, I'm not sure which year they started doing that, but for 2024, you do get the tub. This is going to be nice just to store smaller items, or if you got a fish finder unit, this allows you to run your smaller 10 amp, 20 amp hour battery in this, and it still allows you to store dry bags or camp gear or fishing rods in there. So as big as this opening is, you can store fishing rods in there, especially when you're transporting it. You're going from the house to the lake or river. And it really allows you to keep from having to store your rods inside the truck or in the bed. Those of you that don't have your rod boxes or anything, you can store it in there, and it makes it a lot easier when you're transporting there. Really nice gasket around the lid here, so that's going to keep it pretty watertight. I never like to say anything is waterproof on a kayak because over time, what starts as waterproof becomes water resistant. You do have these channels here that do allow the water to drain out really nicely. That's something that's really nice to see. It's not holding onto that water and allowing it to go in there. It will drain that really good. So, and also I do like these little turn knobs. I know that's a small thing. Latches and knobs on front hatches, they're going to differ from manufacturer to manufacturer. I've always been a big fan of that setup. It's simple. It's easy to replace if something ever breaks. There's no fabric straps or anything on there. So moving on back here, you do have gear track up here. So that's going to be good for if you've got a fish finder unit. You're going to want to be careful, and I always tell people when installing fish finder units on the front of a pedal drive kayak, you always want to be careful with your pedal motion. So before you do any drilling or cutting, make sure you're just doing a full rotation and looking at where that's going. You've also got a little through hole area, so that's where you can run your transducer wire, your power cables. You can run them all in this opening, kind of gives a really nice clean look. And also your front two scupper holes, these are both underneath. You're going to have two different transducer recessed mounts underneath the hull of the kayak. I'll flip it over here in a little bit and show you what the bottom looks like, but just know that both of these scupper holes both have their each own transducer underneath it. The star of the show, in my opinion, in any Jackson pedal drive kayak is the Mark IV. In my opinion, this is one of the best upgrades of any kayak company with their existing hardware. So this here, it's now internally lubricated, so there's no need to have a grease gun or a little maintenance kit with you. It's supposed to be maintenance free. We've been selling these for a couple of years now with the new Mark IV drives, and we've really had no issues with them. So really, really nice, quiet. It's speedy. I don't know if that's anything that they've changed, but it seems to me like it's geared a little bit higher, so you get a little bit more propeller turn with your foot. But again, that's just personal opinion there. But really, really nice setup. Again, I've definitely noticed that it's quieter, and it does seem to be a little bit more durable, obviously, than the previous generation, which most of you know that follow Jackson Kayak that was kind of an issue there for a while. But, definitely happy with that. All of Jackson's pedal drive come with the new Mark IV drive, which I believe last year was the first year for that. Moving back, definitely something that's really unique to Jackson Kayak is the opening. So the opening, you have access to your prop. So this is going to be great if you get grass, weeds, fishing line caught up in that. You just pull that lever. Well, you push it down, you pull it up to put it back down, but you've got three depths. You've got a shallow water feature and a deep water feature, and the third being all the way up into the hull. That's really nice too if you're going over something like a log or a boulder or something that you don't see until the last minute. It's just going to kick it up into the hull, and then with the lever here, that allows you to run it back down. Also, if you know you're going to be in shallow water, having it on that middle setting, it allows you to maneuver that kayak in some pretty shallow water. I would say anywhere from about a foot and a half, maybe around 2 foot on that shallow setting, but you can still utilize that pedal drive. You see here, this kayak does come with a couple of features. So it does come with the red Jackson tow flag, which is nice. Depending on what state you're in, and you may have some different regulations. I know here in Arkansas, it's anything 3 foot past the bumper, you got to have a tow flag, and it's got to, they prefer red, and it's just that motion kind of gives the drivers behind you a little bit more depth perception where they can see how far that comes out. Doesn't prevent it, but it sure helps. You also get a Yak Attack Omega rod holder with this. I've got it just installed here. You're gonna wanna play around with that depending on how you're set up, how you're planning to set this up for fishing. Moving back, very similar rudder controls on both sides. It's the slider system. So the really nice part about this is it is ambidextrous. So you do have the right and the left. It's not just one or the other, which I'm always a big fan of. And also with your rudder controls, having them on both sides, they slide forward and backward instead of having that wheel where you're just turning it clockwise and counterclockwise. They do have it labeled on one side for right and left, but once you use it a few times, you're gonna get the hang of it. On both sides, you've got the bungee. So this is for your paddle clip. You can just run your paddle on the side just as a backup in case something happens with your drive, or if you're in some really shallow water, you want to kick that drive up and go back to paddling, you can do that on either side. A lot of people use these bungees as rod holders because you do have on the nose there, and I forgot to mention that, you do have your rod tip protectors built into the hull of the kayak, which I always really like. If you're familiar with the Coosa FD model from the past, it didn't quite have the rod tip protectors in the hull. They were kind of plastic on the edge of the kayak. Back is the comfort frame seat. This is the seat that's on the bite. When they upgraded the Coosa HD, the Coosa X, all Jackson kayaks are now coming, or at least all Jackson fishing kayaks are coming with the the comfort frame seat. The one thing that they have changed in the last couple of years is instead of doing the softer aluminum seat, they've gone to this sturdier seat. The softer aluminum seat, a lot of people would complain about the aluminum bending, you know, especially if you lost your balance, fell down into it, it could bend a little bit, or if you like to take your seat off the kayak, put it up on the shore, would sometimes kind of bend out of shape and it made it harder to properly fit it back on the kayak. But the comfort frame seat is meant to do just that. You can take it right out of the sliders, throw it up on the bank, and you've got the ability to trim your seat forward and backward, which you need obviously on a pedal drive kayak or most pedal drives. So if you're shorter or taller, you can kind of move it forward and backward. And then to do that, you're just loosening up these wing knobs, moving it forward and backward, and then tightening it up to hold it back in place. Plenty of room underneath the seat to store tackle and gear. In years past, they had that little tray that would pull out. It wouldn't pull out very far, and a lot of people found it to be just kind of more inconvenient than anything else, so they've just opened up that space, which I really like. Moving to the back, you've got a decent sized tank well. This is going to hold most of your Blackpack Pros. I believe a 16 by 16 will fit in there, but you're not going to have a lot of room for anything else. You got quite a bit of bungee back here, so you can kind of reroute that any way you need to. You've got a gear track going across as well as parallel to the tank well, so you can use that for a lot of different rigging, eyelets, anything like that, to where you can reroute your bungee. And then moving on back even further, you've got the large hatch back here. Well, when you open that up, the opening is not as big as the hatch, obviously, but you've also got your rudder control. Now, your rudder control is just really, you can pull the pin and that drops the rudder out, which is a big benefit to me, especially if you're hauling your kayak out of the water or into it. You can kind of lift it up on the front, maybe drag it a little bit and not have to worry about all of that weight going on the rudder itself. It's pretty durable, but when you drop it out, it allows you to kind of lift the nose up, maybe get it up onto the back of the truck or a trailer, depending on how you're transporting it. The rudder itself is, again, it's pretty much the same rudder they've run for a long, long time. Again, pulling that little cotter pin out of there is going to drop it right out. The one pro tip I would give you on that is make sure you're always keeping that pin on the rudder setup itself on the kayak or the actual rudder, because that is one thing that definitely gets lost. Another thing that gets lost is these little wing nuts and T-bolts that hold your drive on. That's the benefit of the drive, is it comes off really easily, especially if you're carrying it. This is a heavy kayak, so this kayak specifically, I believe, weighs about 115 pounds with everything on it, and it's a bit of a load. So taking off the drive, taking off the seat is going to lighten that considerably and make it a little bit easier for two people to haul it around. In the back here also, another thing I forgot to mention, you have two flush-mounted rod holders, and you've also got these little 4 bolts in the back. What that's for, that's the old Scotty mount. So those of you that run Scotty mount rod holders and accessories, you can do that on this kayak. You're just taking out these screws, and then that is going to allow you to do a no-drill Scotty mount install. So those of you that don't know what Scotty mount is, I'll throw a picture up on the screen here just to kind of show you what that looks like. It's a little bit of a star head, and it fits in there where you can kind of move it around, lock it in place. Most companies have gone exclusively to the Yak Attack accessory rail mounting system. There's very few that even run the old Ram balls anymore. So, okay guys, so you see here, this is the hull design of the Coosa FD. Again, nothing groundbreaking or anything, but with Jackson, what they've always done is, in my opinion, Jackson's always done a great job of maximizing stability, but also giving you a very maneuverable kayak, which you would expect out of the Coosa name, because Coosas were originally designed for river and creek fishing, skinny water fishing. Now, obviously with the Coosa HD is a little bit of a heavier duty, so going from 1/2 ton to 3/4 ton truck, if you will. And the Coosa HD, while still a good river and creek fisher, it did kind of add some weight. You're adding plastic, you're adding hardware with more gear track and all that, moving away from the Rand ball mounts. With the Coosa FD, in my opinion, this is a little bit more of a calm flat water kayak. You can still take it on rivers, but with it being a little bit heavier than, say, the Bite, it's kind of a reverse. It's a switcheroo, if you will. where your bite is typically your paddle version of the bite in the recreation and the angler editions. Those are typically going to be flat water kayaks that can handle a little bit of moving water, as to where the Coosa is designed more for that river and creek setup. The pedal drive versions, in my opinion, are a little bit different because the Coosa being a bigger kayak, a heavier kayak, and one that's rigged up a little bit more for that flat water setup. Again, not saying you can't do rivers and creeks, but you may want it to be a little bit of a bigger river because again, you're maneuvering a little bit of a bigger kayak here. Okay, so going over some of the pros and cons. There's plenty of pros with any Jackson kayak in my opinion, because one of the most focused on topics with most people that are getting into kayak fishing is stability. So it's stable, it's capable, it's going to handle a lot of the different waters that you're going to put this into. And as I said before, it's built for flat water, calm flat water, slow moving rivers, but you could put it in some rivers and some skinny water as well. Just kind of know your surroundings. With any kayak, especially the Coosa FD or anything else, you're going to want to get it in a controlled environment to get used to the limitations of the kayak, how it handles, how the primary and secondary stability are, and how comfortable you feel in it. And lastly, the pro, and one of the biggest pros on this kayak is the Mark IV pedal drive is fantastic. You know, they heard the feedback, they had some issues in the past, which they did, and with the old gear drive, and they changed it to more of a belt-fed pedal drive system that is quieter, it's smoother, and just more durable. Because when you're spending the money on this stuff, you want it to last. Okay, so let's go over the cons. The cons, it's a little bit pricey. At $3,549 for 2024, the Jackson Coosa FD can be a little bit on the pricier side. It's all gonna depend on you. How comfortable is it to you? Does it have the layout that you want for the gear that you're wanting to take? You know, maybe you like the internal storage, maybe you like the, the comfort of it, maybe ergonomically it sets just right for your body type. There's a lot to like about this kayak, but at $3,549, you're kind of in the territory of the heavyweights of the pedal drive industry, and namely I'm talking about the Hobie Outback at $37.99. You're pretty close to that range. The Hobie Outback's got a lot more capability as far as where to put items, where to mount items, and the seat is phenomenal and a lot of the same features with some others added into. Another thing too is the native Titan X. The 10.5 is $3,249. And to me, the Titan X is one of the more modern kayaks out there. But again, depending on what you're needing a kayak to do, maybe you don't need all the features that come on some of the other kayaks. For me, the price range, you're kind of getting into there where you need to start separating yourself from the competition to really be considered there. Another big thing to me on the Coosa FD, it is heavy. So at the weight it is, I'd probably like to see a molded in handle on the front. You do have the molded handle on the back, but the fabric handles, to me, with a heavier kayak, it can make it seem a little heavier than it actually is sometimes, and they just don't hold up over time. Sun and water do some crazy stuff to woven fabric, and this kayak really doesn't have the ability, or it's not intended to run a bow mount motor, so to me, you're just better off just doing a molded handle for both securement to a trailer or the back of a truck and just comfort of carrying it around. So you can motorize this on the stern, you can do the Torpedo, you can do the Newport, but bow mount motors on a lot of the Jackson kayaks, since they run the rounded noses, you do have a little bit of a flat spot there, but it's not intended to do it. Now there's some modifications out there, I'm sure, where people do run it, but just know that if you're looking for that bow mount motor option, you may have to go elsewhere within the Jackson Kayak lineup or with a different brand. And that's another con for this, is at the $3,550, to not be able to run the bow mount motor in 2024, you're really kind of behind the 8 ball on that. So you can run the bow mount motor obviously on the Coosa X, and you can run it on the NAR. There's a lot more people running motors on pedal drive kayaks, so again, you need the option at least. And I would like to see them maybe update that in future versions of this kayak to maybe make it mix a little bit better with what's out there. Okay guys, so appreciate you coming by watching. I hope this kind of answered some questions if you've been looking at this model, or if you've been looking at some other models, but maybe this one fills a need that you didn't know was there. What do you think of the Coosa FD? Let me know down in the comments below. Do you have experience with the Coosa FD? You know, do you currently own one? And what do you like and what do you not like about it? What are some of the concerns you have about this kayak? Again, start a conversation in the comments down below. I always like interacting with you guys, and it could help somebody in their next decision, either going with the Coosa FD or a different model there. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching the video. We'll see you on the next one.